at some point, maybe we should say the reason that America keeps losing is because of Donald Trump.
Happy Super Tuesday. Right now, 15 states and 1 U.S. territory are holding contests as we speak. And while it is expected that President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump will each have strong showings in their parties' respective primaries, there is a lot to get through, my friends, in terms of what the results could mean for the November elections. Joining me now to break down the latest is The Hill's Brett Samuels, who covers the White House for us at thehill.com. Brett, there are actually 7 states at least who have organized within the Democratic Party for there to be uncommitted votes. Now, these are protest votes against President Biden for his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Is the Biden campaign spooked?
What Biden campaign officials have told me is that they are taking this really seriously. They're aware that there's this unrest among folks who are voting uncommitted, especially in places like Michigan, which we saw last week, Super Tuesday states as well, Minnesota and elsewhere. So, I think that they have time to turn this around, to bring those folks back into the fold before November. But this is definitely something that Biden folks have told me that they are taking seriously. They're aware of this. They're keeping an eye on it.
It seems that they're more mad at President Biden than they are at the terrorist organization Hamas. Is that a correct assessment based on your reporting?
I don't know that I'd go that far, but what these folks have been telling us is that they feel Joe Biden has not really understood the gravity of the situation in Gaza, that he has not really publicly reflected enough outrage, basically, at Israel for how they are shelling civilians in Gaza, Palestinian civilians. So there's really a great deal of frustration there. And the Biden administration is aware of that. They've sent officials on the ground to talk with these communities, but certainly work to do before November.
But when you talk to them specifically, the President Biden has said consistently that he wants there to be a short-term ceasefire at least. And Israel has said that they would agree to a ceasefire provided that the Hamas terrorists release the hostages that were detained on the October 7th terrorist attack. Hamas has consistently said that they are not going to do that. So when you're interviewing these far-left progressives, what's their response to Hamas refusing to put forth the hostages?
They really feel like, Israel is destroying their community. They feel like Palestinian civilians are not getting enough empathy, sympathy, support, attention from this White House. Certainly we've seen a difference of opinion. Rashida Tlaib, for example, in Michigan, has really, she voted uncommitted. She's really been quite upset with the Biden administration's handling of this. So the question is, what can the Biden administration do beyond, saying Israel needs to protect civilians to bring these folks back into the fold?
Well, it was the United States, not Russia, not China, that deployed food into Gaza as it relates to humanitarian aid. So these far-left progressives, I just struggle with what they want the administration to do more of when you've got a terrorist organization who is holding on to these hostages. Meanwhile, that's what's happening on the left. Meanwhile, same situation, different story a bit on the right. About 20% of Republican voters from the first primary states say that they will not vote for Trump under any circumstances, including former GOP Maryland Governor Larry Hogan and Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. So what impact, Brett, are these voters going to have in the upcoming election for the Republican side of things?
It's an interesting question because on the one hand, it's not surprising that folks like Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Larry Hogan, who have sort of been outspoken Trump critics, would say that they're not going to vote for the former president. But the question is whether this is a sign of a wider problem for the former president. Certainly in a state like New Hampshire, which is sort of up for grabs, that already voted in the primary process, that could make a big difference in a tight election. States like Virginia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, if just enough moderate Republicans or independents who voted for Trump in 2020 say, hey, I'm done, I can't back this guy again. If enough of those voters say, well, I'm voting for Joe Biden, then that could be enough to make a difference in some of these key swing states.
What are you going to be watching for tonight during the results? I know you're going to be telling me what you're going to be watching for during our special coverage on thehill.com, but what are you going to be watching for tonight?
Yes, tune in. I will be looking at margins. The margins, both for former President Trump, can he run up the score on Nikki Haley enough that she basically has to end her campaign? She's been sort of a thorn in his side when he wants to turn to the general election fully. And similarly, on the left, with President Biden, the uncommitted votes that you mentioned, how many folks vote uncommitted? How many of them vote uncommitted in states that could potentially be up for grabs in November? So I'll be looking at whether Biden and Trump are able to run up the score enough to sort of settle any concerns about whether they're really ready for November.
Brett, did you see this in the New Yorker this week? Because President Biden gave an interview to the New Yorker where he said that he was confident that he could win against former President Trump this November. But is there a reason for him to be so confident? He also predicted in that interview, I'm not sure if you saw it, he said that he doesn't think that Trump would accept the results of the election.
A rare print interview for the president. But I think in both cases, the president is basically looking to history and believing that history will repeat itself, both in the sense that he beat Trump once, he thinks he can do it again. Polling has not really given any indication that there's an alternative out there for Democrats who could handily defeat former President Trump. So I think Biden believes he's the guy to do it again. And similarly, when we look at whether Trump would accept the results and whether we'd have a similar incident, Trump has not accepted the results of 2020. He's continued to use language about a rigged election, a stolen election, and firing up his base with that. So I think there's genuine concern from a lot of Democrats that we could see sort of a repeat where he refuses to accept the election results if he doesn't win.
I'm going to be looking at Texas and Virginia. Virginia specifically has my eye to see how Nikki Haley does in Virginia against Trump, particularly in the suburbs. That could be a bellwether, so to speak, as we head into the November elections for turnout for Republicans. So I've got my eye on Glenn Youngkin's Virginia. President Biden, meanwhile, he's also preparing for this week's State of the Union address on Thursday. I was really struck to see the reports that House Speaker Mike Johnson is going to be taking the parents of the Wall Street Journal detained reporter Evan, who has been detained by Russia. That's a really strong showing of bipartisan support on that front to get him released. What are you going to be looking for at this week's State of the Union address?
So a couple of things. I think, this is a huge opportunity for President Biden to sort of reset or relaunch basically his reelection effort. Last year, about 27 million Americans watched the State of the Union. So this is a rare opportunity where he's got millions of eyeballs on him. He can try and dispel concerns about his age, his vigor by giving a really strong, confident speech here and sort of pushing back on Republican critics. It's his chance to lay out his vision for a second term. So big opportunity for President Biden. And as you mentioned, Evan Gershkovich, who will be the guest of Speaker Mike Johnson. I think this will be an interesting thing to watch who will be in attendance. The White House told us that they tried to invite the wife of the late Alexei Navalny, but she was unable to attend. So I think, another nod to sort of pressure on Russia and whether we'll see sort of bipartisan support for something like that in the State of the Union.
His parents are going to be in attendance. Obviously, Evan has been detained by Russia for many, many months, but no doubt a powerful show of support for journalists on behalf of the speaker, but also to show a bipartisan effort in contrasting what Russia does to journalists versus the freedom of speech liberties that we all are privileged to have here in the United States. I'm going to be watching for the ratings. I don't know if you knew this, but the last year, the top 21 highest rated Nielsen events were all football games, NFL football games. Okay, number 22 is the State of the Union address. So to your point, this is truly, even in the decline of cable news, this is truly the last thing that can unify and get a high rating and get the attention of the public heading in to an election year. So this is a massive opportunity for President Biden. It's also a massive opportunity for the Republicans. They're staring down a shutdown. They're staring down midterms. They're staring down a conversation about women's reproductive health. So there's going to be a lot of showmanship Thursday night. And I know that no doubt you will keep us covered. But first, we got to get through Super Tuesday, my friend. The Hill's Brett Samuels, thank you so much for coming on and breaking down all of that. And remember, tonight, go to thehill.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel for special programming for Super Tuesday. That's it for today's Daily Debrief. My name is Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.